Hey everyone, happy Thanksgiving. We hope you're enjoying this holiday week. I know I'll be eating my own weight in mashed potatoes and pumpkin pie. The Seattle Eats team is taking this week off, but we got a special bonus episode. A few months ago, my colleague Jackie Varriano sat down with 4 leading chefs in Seattle to ask a question that's been on everyone's minds. Why are restaurants so expensive right now? Our panel answered that during a live event at Town Hall in September. We're sharing part of that conversation today. As you'll hear, there is not a simple answer. It's tied to the way Seattle has grown and changed over the years, and the way the food industry has changed, too. There's also a big shift coming in Seattle's minimum wage. In January, it will go up to more than $20 an hour, and the city's rules about tipping will change, so employees who make tips will get an even larger raise. All of that plays into how our guests today think about the calculus of running their restaurants. Jackie will be asking the tough questions and moderating the conversation. We're starting off with a question about the upcoming increase in Seattle's minimum wage. Ethan Stowell answers it. He's a Seattle bigwig. He runs Ethan Stowell Restaurants, or ESR. Here's Jackie.
Some people say that you've had 10 years to adjust to this huge rise for the tip credit to expire. But inflation is not new. Rising costs are not new. Why is the wage jump feel so big now? Like, why does it feel like such a panic right now? Ethan, you want to take that?
I think it's important to also recognize, first off, this minimum wage thing is only part of this conversation. And I think it's also important to know that ESR as a company is actually for it. We like it. We like the idea of it. We like about bumping it up. There's a whole bunch of things that have gone into the last 10, 20 years of restaurants. You know, this is my 21st year of owning restaurants, and it's definitely more complex than it was 20 years ago. It's just harder, and it's more expensive. Insurances are more expensive. Rent's more expensive. In fact, things that have changed, I think personally, I think the industry's changed for a lot of good things, a lot of things that we take for granted, right? So when I first started in the restaurant industry, there was no need to provide insurance. And I want to be very clear. I'm not talking about ESR. I'm talking about the restaurant industry in general. That's how my perspective is going to be on this whole night. It's not going to be about ESR. It's going to be about the restaurant industry as a whole from the perspective of in generalities from previous times to now. So there was no vacation pay. Oftentimes there was no overtime pay. There was a lot of free labor with internships. There was no paternity leave, maternity leave. There was none of all these things that we enjoy. There was no sick safe time. There was no PTO. All of these things have been changes, I think, for the best. They're great, right? I think it's great for somebody who has a kid to be able to go out and spend 3-6 months with their newborn. I think it's really important. You know, it just wasn't a thing in the restaurant industry 20 years ago. Nobody was talking about it. Nobody had it. Those are all added benefits that somebody has to pay for. We have to pass it on to our customers in some regard, right? You know, it's the same thing with this new minimum wage. We as a community have decided that we feel like there's an ethical responsibility to raise our minimum wage to the highest in the nation. We want to lead by example. And I'm all for the raise. I agree with the mission. But I think it's important for people to understand, if we are going to have that mission, which I'm for, we're going to have, simply put, we're going to have the most expensive restaurants in the country. That's just how that math works out. Servers work on minimum wage plus tips. That's how the model's always been. Bartenders are the same. Hosts the same. Bussers the same. Cooks in some fashion have been part of that as well. So if we did this as a community, we elected officials that made decisions for us as a group, and the decision was that we were going to raise our minimum wage and not have a tip credit because we don't believe in a tip credit. As a community, we're going to make ourselves the highest minimum wage in the country, and that's going to have us having to pay the highest restaurant prices in the country.
Okay, so employees are also our community members, right? So employees are ones who are probably eating at all of these other restaurants as well. They're participating in community things as well as being employees of your restaurant. Are your employees saying anything, or how do they feel about rising costs, rising minimum wage?
I think the big thing for my employees personally is, they want healthcare.
This is Victor Steinbrueck, a Seattle chef. His first restaurant is Local Tide in Fremont, a counter-service seafood spot.
And I want to be able to give that to them. But with all the costs that it also takes to run a small business, especially as a single shop, it's difficult. We're moving towards that. Our want is to make our employees happy. It helps with the sustainability of the longevity of our restaurant. I signed a lease for 10 years. I want to be around for 10 years at least. And that requires taking care of employees in a way that makes them feel heard and seen, and just listening to them. I know for my employees, it's a close-knit, I don't want to use the word family, but it feels like that sometimes.
No, I don't think anybody.
I know that's a buzzword, I know. But it feels like that some ways, And so it's a community. There we go. And part of that is like having a relationship with every single one of them as a small business, a single restaurant, and taking into account whatever their needs are on any given day.
I mean, let's be honest. All of us right now are feeling pinched, right? You have inflation that's high that is a across the board factor for pretty much anything. You've got interest rates that are really high, which really erodes consumer confidence and their willingness to go out and spend, right? So restaurants on national level are this year so far down about 10 to 15% annually. So you have restaurant sales year over year going down, costs going up, and it's just a tough scenario for your community neighborhood restaurants. It just is. I mean, it's not like it won't come back, but we're actually in a low point right now, and some people don't really get it, right? Like, oh, you need to lower your prices. It's really hard to do that right now because customer counts are actually down, and it's partly because it's so expensive. But the community restaurants didn't cause the price increases, right? My point is it's a tough time for restaurants. And then you have a city like Seattle that has crazy high cost of living. It's just the perfect storm that everybody's got going on right now. But it's a moment in time. It will pass. The consumer confidence will go back up. Interest rates will go down. And people will feel like they have more cash to go out and spend. And will get adjusted to these new prices. But it's a big spike right now.
So when we talk about prices, I think we're mostly talking about menu prices. Is there like a direct correlation between your costs and menu prices? Like what goes into what things cost on a menu?
I think that people have this idea that as restaurateurs, because we buy in bulk, we get this great price.
That's Kristi Brown. She started off as a caterer with her company, That Brown Girl Cooks. She opened her soul food restaurant Communion in 2022.
Right? And then we mark it up accordingly, to the costs and the things that it takes to run a business. And it's just not true. It literally is not true. If not, sometimes maybe close to equal to what you're paying in the grocery store. And so then you think about the ideal of all the things that it takes, to get it from the place that we buy it from to your table. One of the things for us is that we source from a lot of small vendors. So a lot of small vendors don't have delivery. So that means I have to hire someone to go pick up the food from the South End because I'm representing the South End in my food, and that's this conversation that I'm having. So there's a lot of little extra costs that people don't understand that we go through to get the food on the table, especially for smaller businesses, and I think that's super important to understand.
That's a great one. Anybody else? Rachel?
I think that's basically, isn't this like Econ 101, your prices all over reflecting your costs, right?
Rachel Yang is another Seattle chef and a James Beard Awards semifinalist. Her restaurants are Revel and Joule, both in Fremont.
Your cost is just rising, and there's absolutely no other way but the price to rise. The thing is that when we talk about, the topic of this is why are restaurants so expensive, right? So because price has basically feelings. It's expensive or it's cheap. We're all feeling expensive. The reason why I use the word feeling is that we all have an individual has a different basically idea of what is a good amount of cost, a price they are willing to pay. And then if it is more than that, and we're all feeling expensive. Or if you basically have to divide your pie into smaller pieces and you don't have as much to allocate to that, we feel expensive. So expensive is happening sometimes not because of us, because of when everyone is basically pinched and when they have a smaller pie piece to go into the restaurant budget, it's expensive, 100%. I feel the same way. its absolute dollar is expensive? Yes, because of the Seattle, as we all know, has the highest inflation in the country. They talk about the inflation for about 10 years. It has gone up about 50%. And so we try really hard to find a way for people to not feel expensive, because it's the feeling of expensive and and the reason why we are having this conversation is that we understand that the cost is rising. So how do we make sure that people get the value when they go out to eat so they don't feel so expensive? Because we all want to support our community. We all want to basically make sure that every single person who works at the restaurant or any other places get their, minimum wage plus more, because we are talking about minimum wage, and we all of us talked quite a bit about actually a lot of people working in a restaurant make more than minimum wage. But however, minimum wage is still much, much lower than living wage here in Seattle. I don't know if you can notice, we're all actually chef restaurateurs. So I like to actually say that means we all got into this industry because we love to cook. We love food. We didn't get here so that we can make money. And every single day, the reason why we are here was because we wanted to make our food accessible. Without people coming into our restaurant, tasting our food, it doesn't mean anything. We love people to come in so that the restaurant is busy, everyone's making money. But more than anything, what we want is people come into our restaurant and having the moment, celebrating their birthdays, enjoying their anniversaries, having this moment that we all have in our memories about going to a restaurant and what it means to people. And we want to be accessible. And that's why we're struggling and trying to have this conversation. When the cost is rising, how can we keep the restaurant accessible as much as possible?
I think it's interesting, just a tag on to what you're saying, because the thing is although inflation has grown so much, even though your prices were $8, I venture to say that $8 thing is maybe $12 now, maybe. But you have to it's such a push to do that when that reflects the actual cost. But this perceived idea is that you come to us to be comforted. You through the food, through the atmosphere, through the entertainment, whatever that means inside each restaurant. And then when we're actually trying to balance that thing out, we get persecuted for trying to actually reflect the cost that it is. And so that's a really, that is a very challenging place to be in as a small restaurateur, just trying to figure out how to make that balance. And so actually, Ethan is the one that helped me understand more about the different things, that how we have to play tricks. It's such a crazy thing. So there's this thing I'm spending all this time with this one particular dish, but I can't charge as much. So I find something else that's cheaper and try to raise the price on that to kind of level the things out so that I can provide you with all of this space that you want when you come to eat with us. And so it's just such a dance. It's nothing simple about it, and I think that it's been fascinating for me as a caterer that transitioned into restaurants to see people's perceived value change so drastically. We're dealing with people's emotions around their food, emotions around the history of their eating. It's just so much that we have to take into consideration. And I think that how we're pricing things out is not just merely the labor, all the different things. It's also this emotional attachment to food that we're also having to put a value on for folks.
We all want the same thing, to give our employees a livable wage, give them health care. They deserve everything. They work so hard. I know
give our customers great value.
And give our customers great value, 100%. It's so funny to think about how much customers live in our heads. Am I right? We put something forth, we come up with a new menu item, and we put that on the menu. It could be one customer that says, we don't like this. That might come off the menu the next day, based off one customer. We think so much about you.
Once a month, I get on Victor's Yelp, create a fake account, and say something like that. I just like messing with the new guys.
And it works.
That's good to know. How much power we have. No, we don't need any more power. We don't need it.
No, you don't.
Okay, well then let's talk about service fees, tipping, surcharges, because it's one way that restaurant owners can recoup costs, can spread the money further, I think. And I think a lot of people, when we talk about service fees and surcharges, the pushback, especially comments that we got on this story that ran. There were over 700 comments on this story, and a lot of them said, why don't you just raise prices? Which I think we have talked about tonight is just not the answer. So why do a service charge or surcharges?
We use our service charge to like help us with balancing out the labor piece, like especially for like with us, ours helps with our kitchens because it's shared tips, but it's on a tier and it's all kind of. I'm not the math person,
it's a complicated thing.
It is. It's super complicated, and everyone has their own formula about how they do things. But we use our service charge to balance out the costs, particularly for the back of the house.
Yeah.
So I think if you're talking about tips and service charge and all that stuff, I think it's important to really go back and see. Because I think all restaurants suffer from the fact that it's been a system that's been in place and is the norm for our customers, and that's a burden on us to change it. It's really hard. How it's usually been done is server takes your order. It used to be that servers did a lot of table side things at fancy restaurants, so they got the tip. Make bananas flambe, steak Diane, all kinds of stuff. Going out to dinner was like a show. And the servers were the one that usually did that show. So the tips went to them. That's just how it was. Servers got paid less because they made a bunch more money in tips. And then the restaurant would take care of the kitchen crew and pay them an hourly rate that made sense. As the years go by, servers' minimum wage goes up, and they're actually catching up to the cooks. Right? So, if a server's making $20 an hour and a cook's making 25, if all the tips go to that server's probably making 45 or 50. Could be 60, could be 70, depending on where they work. So the issue, how tip credits have come in, if they said some states believe in tip credits, they say, okay, we're going to pay the server because they make tips less money per hour. Right? So like in Idaho, we have a restaurant there. Our servers, and it's every restaurant does it, so it's not. I don't feel bad saying it. Every server in the city of Boise gets paid $3.50 an hour, and then they make about $30 to $40 an hour in tips because they take all of their tips. When the minimum wage is higher, and there's not a thing called a tip credit, I'm not arguing for it or against it. I promise you this. What has happened over the years is that there's been a tip split between the front of the house and the back of the house. So some people like Victor, or it doesn't matter what position you work in or what side of the house, the front of the house or back of the house, everybody shares in tips equally. Some have it's 80-20, where 80% goes to the servers and 20% goes to the back of the house. Everybody has different variations. And it's all a total huge pain. I'll tell you right now, all restaurant owners that take tips don't like tips. At least that's my experience. But that's what goes on in all of restaurants' heads, where they're trying to figure out how to make it even. So the thing that all restaurant owners, particularly chef-owned restaurants and independent operators who have a very personal connection to the business and their employees, they just want things to be fair. So what we did the $3.50 an hour minimum wage increase last year because we're over 500 employees. We said this is going to be too much of a burden on our customers because, hey, we're going to go up $3.50 an hour. Means we have to raise our prices a bunch. So what we did was we gave everybody the dollar amount of the increase, but we switched it to service charge. So now instead of people getting tips, everybody's just an hourly rate, which is really good for them because most restaurants, when you have a vacation pay, they get paid their vacation on minimum wage. If you give them an hourly rate, they can actually use their vacation hours at that true rate they make.
When I used to work in restaurants, we didn't have vacation. We didn't have healthcare. My first serving job was in North Dakota, and my hourly rate was $119. I think I got a raise to $217 by the time I was in college, but still. But it's also just a part of like change in Seattle, I think, and how everything has changed for a multitude of reasons. And a lot of that is cost because that's what we're talking about. But I'm wondering like what it would have taken if you were to open Revel today, how much it would have cost versus when you first opened that restaurant.
Oh, wow.
If you even know, if you can even.
I mean, because we actually, so the really good comparison is that we opened Revel, I guess originally Revel 13 years ago, and then we just opened a cake shop. And then the cake shop is basically has no kitchen because it's retail space. It's 300 square feet, and Revel originally was probably close to 1,500, and there was some storage space in the basement. Still, the cake shop costed more.
Really? The cake shop?
Absolutely.
With no kitchen?
With no kitchen.
And a minuscule footprint.
Absolutely, yeah. It's in.
You guys seem surprised.
We just kind of forgot.
I think that's hilarious because I feel like I remember, like I saw something, I was looking up this before we got here, and I saw that it was like, oh, maybe somewhere it could cost somewhere between $30,000 and $250,000 to open up a restaurant. And I was like, okay, that's like when you already have the restaurant. Like it's already there. It's like, I think our HVAC costs like $150,000. Like the costs are ridiculous. And again, we opened up in a pandemic. So the cost was rising as we were building. Like we would do something and be like, hurry up. You got to hurry up and pay for this right quick because it's about to go up. And then like we missed a deadline and it was like ×2. And it was just like amazing. So I know for sure, like that's not surprising to me at all. It's not just the cost of the space. It's the cost of all the licenses. Again, like when we talk about the city and about what do they do to help us balance this whole thing out. Because it's like, okay, we just can't keep stacking on the prices. And then it's not only, it's like the food, it's like the build out, it's the equipment, it's the repair. I remember when we were building, there was one company in the city that makes elevators. One. So then construction got paused because they couldn't get some of the equipment to us because there was another. It's like that's how small this situation is, and we end up paying that cost for that. So it's just like, and that's how it is for a lot of these things. Like there's only so many HVAC guys, there's only so many plumbers that do non-constructive plumbing. It's just always these things that you have to consider. So those prices are raising for them. It's going to raise for us.
I'm in kind of in a funny position right now where I'm toying around with the idea of opening a commissary kitchen. And I found a space that's about 3,000 square feet. The initial bid on that space, with architectural fees, the HVAC system, everything was $1.2 million. And I'm not looking for a retail space. I'm looking for a kitchen, with just the equipment in there. I think the hood itself, the system itself, with the venting and everything, was almost $400,000. But that's a huge fear, right? Just to open something up and knowing that you're, one, especially in a commissary kitchen space where you're not making money in that space unless you're doing catering or something. But to pay that all back as a restaurant where we're talking about raising prices and getting kickback, is a huge fear to grow a business. When at the end of the day, I think for me, part of the reason for wanting to grow a business is to create more opportunity for the people that stick by me, that have been working so hard, to be able to offer them more opportunity than just a line cook position, just a front house position. And so it's the long game too. We're not just thinking about the day-to-day. We're thinking about how do we stay in business, which requires us to take care of our employees 10 years down the road.
That was a live event from the Seattle Times food team at Town Hall. Thanks to Jackie for moderating, and to our guests, Kristi Brown, Victor Steinbrueck, Ethan Stowell, and Rachel Yang. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a conversation about the best wines at Costco this holiday season. Seattle Eats is a production of the Seattle Times and KUOW, part of the NPR network. You can support Seattle Eats by investing in the local newsroom and the specialized beats that make this sort of storytelling possible. Please consider joining and subscribing at kuow.org/eats and seattletimes.com. Seattle Eats is produced by Claire McRain and edited by Jim Gates and Trevor Lensmeyer. I'm Tom Den. Catch you next time.